is so magnificent. Yes. Folks, we'll be closer to the big three automakers becoming the big one. Chrysler could be just days away from disappearing. And GM is about to pull the plug on the brand that brought America the muscle car. Allie Velshi is here to break down what's happening with these automakers.
Yeah.
Allie, man, what's going on here?
All right, remember this date, this Friday, because this may be the last full week that we have what we call the big three. As of next Thursday, Chrysler had better come up with a plan for its survival. If it doesn't, the government says it will cause that company to go into bankruptcy. Now, what does bankruptcy mean for a company like Chrysler? Well, it could mean that it has to break itself up. It'll probably end up selling the Jeep brand if it doesn't make some deal with Fiat. But, you know, there's this looming deal with Fiat. I'm not sure anybody understands exactly how that's going to fix Chrysler. So remember that. We're about a week away from Chrysler possibly not being there anymore. Let's look at the other thing. General Motors has received another $2 billion in loans from the government. This comes just days after General Motors announced that it may not make $1 billion repayment on June 1st. This company has until June 1st, so about 5 weeks away, to actually come up with a solution to its problem. So we got two companies here that don't look a whole lot closer to their solutions. Now, there is something that's going on with General Motors that's worth thinking about in order to try and trim down, in order to focus on what's strong. It's getting rid of what's weak. We have unconfirmed reports right now, but I expect they'll be confirmed by Monday morning that General Motors is going to be discontinuing its Pontiac line. Now, for many of you out there, Pontiac was the beginning of the muscle car. It was the entertaining brand. It was the one that was exciting for General Motors. Well, it's just not very exciting for them right now, so Pontiac may be disappearing. This is a big issue for both of these two companies. Ford did report its earnings today. They did better than was expected, but it was still a loss. But Ford may end up being the one company that remains standing.
And of course, my dream car is a Dodge Viper, so I'm really concerned. That's my dream car. I'm serious. Now, Allie, of course, the deadline for Chrysler is April 30th, next Thursday. Yeah. What's the best case, worst case scenario?
Okay, best case scenario is that Chrysler comes up with a deal.
Yeah, I don't know why you sat down, because you got to go back to the wall.
Well, I like walking around.
Your work is not done.
Work off with a half a box of
Pete.
Today. Listen, the best case scenario is that Chrysler makes some kind of a deal and continues to operate. That's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario can be actually very dangerous, and that is that Chrysler has to shut down at least part or maybe all of its operation. That affects the suppliers to the company. Those suppliers in many cases also supply other companies, including General Motors or Ford. If those companies can't get the parts that they need to continue to make their cars, those companies can start to suffer. Distribution centers get shut down, and entire communities get hurt when this happens. And there are some people in the auto industry that say the failure of any one of these companies could cause a ripple effect that could cause some 3 million people to lose their jobs, which brings us right back to square one about whether we should be continuing to do everything we can to save these auto companies.
All right, you can sit down now, folks.
Thank you.
Let's bring in Peter Schiff, the president and chief global strategist for Euro-Pacific Capital. He's the author of The Little Book of Bull Moves in Bear Markets. Now, Peter, look at this poll. 76% of all Americans, according to a CNN opinion research poll, think that we should simply let these car companies fail. Why do you believe they are right?
Well, you know, failure is a part of capitalism, and sometimes we have to let companies fail. You know, if the government had let Chrysler fail back in the 1970s, which they should have done, and a lot of people look back at that bailout as a success, if they had let them fail back then, I'm sure that the reemerged Chrysler would have been a much stronger company. It would not be going bankrupt today. And General Motors, if we had let Chrysler fail, that would have forced serious changes at General Motors. They would have been able, the management would have been able to get good concessions out of their labor unions. And I think General Motors would be in much better shape today and would not be on the verge of bankruptcy.
Allie, it's real easy to sit here and say, well, let them fail. But the reality is you have jobs, you have communities impacted, you have people who own homes. And so this thing could have a ripple effect across the country.
Peter's logic often makes sense on written pages and in classrooms. But the reality, Peter, is we've had more than 5 million people unemployed so far. And let's say somebody's right about this and some portion of those 3 million more people become unemployed. Doesn't that hurt us so much more in an economy, Peter? Is that something we can... to have 8 million people unemployed is not more damaging than not having those people unemployed?
Look, I don't think we'd have more people unemployed. I think by keeping people employed at these companies, we're destroying jobs someplace else. And I think we'd have a much more vibrant automobile industry had we let Chrysler fail 30 years ago. And I think if we let Chrysler and General Motors fail right now, 5 years from now, we'll have a better automobile industry than if we keep them in business, because we're keeping money-losing companies in business, companies that are not making cars profitably. Nobody is buying them. And now if we put the government in charge of designing cars, what, we're all going to make cars for Ed Begley Jr. and then nobody else is going to buy them?
Peter, isn't there another alternative? And that is, you know, there used to be a time when government enforced antitrust laws, so we didn't have giant companies dominating every industry that then become too big to fail. Wouldn't it be better if we had 30 car companies or 300 car companies, and then capitalism could work, they could fail without having 5 million jobs at risk?
Nobody is too big to fail. That's the point. We have to let big companies fail because you know what that does? When you create the illusion of too big to fail, you put the smaller companies at a competitive disadvantage because they can't borrow money because nobody wants to lend to them because there's risk. Everybody wants to lend to the big companies where they perceive no risk.
First of all, Eric, it's interesting. We talked about this earlier in our meeting that there's a disconnect between people who see this story and they say, that doesn't affect me.
Well, there is, because, you know, we talk about it so much that to us, we think, oh, yes, this could cause a huge ripple effect.
Right.
But let's think about the average American. People who are worried about their jobs, who may have lost their jobs, sitting at home, most people's biggest concern is the roof over my head, not the ripple effect. And it's interesting, there was a CNN opinion research poll done earlier this month that found 55% say it's no problem at all if the auto industry goes bankrupt. 30% it's only a minor problem. So you have 85% of respondents there who are saying, really, if these companies fail, it doesn't affect me. And yet we're hearing studies that it does. There is a disconnect.
Allie, real quick, some towns could frankly disappear.
Absolutely. Towns can disappear. Dealerships, there are about almost 10,000 dealerships in this country. They pay for sponsorships. They pay for teams. They pay for advertising in local papers. Those jobs disappear. Let's just, it's fine if you agree, like Peter does, that's okay, but let's just understand what it is. The jobs will go away.
10 seconds, 10 seconds.
How many jobs is the government going to destroy by keeping Chrysler and General Motors in business? Think about that. Think about all the unforeseen damage behind the scenes.
Hey, President Obama's coming up on his 100th day in office. Of course, CNN is planning a special primetime coverage next Wednesday starting at 7 p.m. Eastern. So, while wait for his national report card, before we go, Peter, what's your grade for how the president is handling the economy?
Well, you know, I don't grade on a curve, and I don't believe in no president left behind, so I'm going to have to give him an F.
Oh!
I'm shocked. I'm shocked.
Peter Schiff always brings it, man. He swings for the fences every time.
The only reason it's not an F- is because he hasn't started a war.
Oh, okay. Peter Schiff, thanks for joining us. We certainly appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Folks, it's Maverick versus Maverick, McCain versus McCain. Hear what Dad says about his daughter.